The Protect College Sports Act is getting revisions and more money is about to be allowed for all schools. Can Kansas State keep up? Is this going to be something they can handle? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and on today's episode, it's brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action on FanDuel.com, play daily dingers, and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. Well, welcome on into the show. On today's edition, we're going to talk some thoughts we have just a few days before fall camp. The Maxwell Award watch list came out. A couple Kansas State players on there. We'll give our takes there. But first, I want to start off with a report from Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, because the latest draft of the Protect College Sports Act has been distributed to Senate members. And the reports, the changes that have happened are drastically, they're numbers that could drastically impact how Kansas State can compete, not only inside the Big 12, but as college athletics as a whole moving forward. Now, there's some new language. It closes some loopholes as well into some of the revenues into the roster. But the main justification here, the main thing that I think is something we need to discuss, is that there's a section that outlines a new $22.5 million retention pool. Yeah, so they're going to add even more money to this revenue share thing, as well as $5 million extra for Olympic and women's sports, bringing the total per school annual cap to $48.8 million. We're nearing $50 million that you're going to be allowed to utilize. Now, Ross Dellinger did put this little caveat in his tweet. He says this, quote, "Most within the industry believe that at least 15 and as many as 30 programs are currently spending more than that on athletes," end quote. But look, if the number is already up there, that number is obviously going to increase larger than 30. And who knows if those 15 or 30 teams decide to go above and beyond even more because they want to find that competitive advantage. My biggest concern here is, can programs like Kansas State, and there are other schools inside this Big 12 conference that I think qualify for this concern as well, but obviously we're focused on the Wildcats on today's conversation. Can they keep up? Can they keep up instead of the $20.5 million revenue share, or 21.5, excuse me? Can they keep up if it's almost $49 million per season? Because although this is a cap, it's basically an expectation. A cap means this is what you're allowed to do. But if you go anything lower, then you're just detrimenting yourself. It's like in baseball. I watched a lot of baseball today, a lot of news because of the MLB trade deadline. It's like in baseball, where they're talking about caps and floors in the near future potentially. But right now, the reason they're doing that is because certain low market teams refuse to spend money. And for the most part, those teams are not successful. They don't have the competitive advantage of those Los Angeles Dodgers that are willing to spend and spend and spend and spend. Those Kansas City Royals, they don't do that. Those Guardians, those Pirates, they don't do that. It's the same question here with Kansas State. Now, I'm not saying we're brokies. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I am discussing is, if 21.5 was the number, and obviously Texas Tech was surpassing that, what does Texas Tech do when it's 48.8? What does BYU do? What does some of these other schools inside the conference step up to do? And then let's branch even farther. Because in this world of college athletics where we live right now, it's not just a in your conference conversation. As of right now, you have to win the Big 12 to make the college ball playoffs. But if this expands to 24 teams, which seems to be inevitable in the near future, at large has a really good chance as well. I think Kansas State's first college football playoff appearance happens because they're an at-large bid. That's my gut feeling. Whether that happens this year, next year, the year after, it'll be an at-large. Maybe it's not because they win the Big 12. In order to be seen as an at-large team, you have to be successful. You might not win the entire conference, but you got to go 10-2 against, tough opponents. So in order to win against said tough opponents, you have to have a good roster. Well, how do you get a good roster inside the world of college athletics today? It's that little paper, I guess digital now. Can I even make the term talking about rubbing paper together? If I even told you about rubbing 2 pennies, would you even know that? Because they're discontinued now. It's money, folks. It's money. That's what it is. And that's why it's the first discussion on what has changed to this Protect College Sports Act. Doubling the revenue share, annual cap to $48.8 million. They also talked about keeping the provision to remain, their expansion remain unchanged. Meaning that power leagues are going to be capped at 19 schools. So that means 3 more schools allowed left for the Big 12. And if for any reason, if Kansas State wanted to leave the Big 12, I don't know where they'd go, but let's just make this assumption that they wanted to leave somewhere. What would be the most realistic? The Big 10, if you were going to go to another conference? Like, I don't think that's realistic at all, but I think out of all the other ones, that probably would be the one, right? Well, you'd have to be an independent for 5 years beforehand. That doesn't fly for anybody. That doesn't fly for Ohio State, Clemson, Florida State, Alabama. I mean, that doesn't fly for Michigan. It doesn't fly for those high revenue schools. That's a tough thing to do. Losing that is asking yourself to lose money for half a decade, to not be a successful program, and then come into a conference at the bottom of the totem pole. You're asking to become a Rutgers after a 5-year period of being down. That's what you're doing. And the reason that they brought that in is for that exact reason. They don't want power conference schools jumping the other power conference schools. The 19 number is strategic. I think it has a lot of things to do with the Big 10 and Notre Dame. But it does leave 3 open spots for the Big 12. So let's speculate a little bit. You're not going to want to get anybody else from power conferences because they have to wait around for 5 years. So who do you chase after? Do you go after UConn? Brett Yormark's very big in being a basketball conference. UConn's already an independent. They're grandfathered into that rule. They can join a power conference immediately. Would make sense. Do you go after some of the other Pac-12 schools? Washington State, Oregon State. Do you finally give them a shot after bringing in the rest of those Pac-12 schools just a few years ago? Do you take a different route? UTSA, Memphis, Tulane. There's a lot of interesting things that I think the Big 12 has to think about over the next couple years, and maybe even sooner. If this thing is approved, I think that expansion is going to go haywire for a couple of months, maybe even before the college football season ends. A couple other fun rules here. Fun in the fact of obviously don't like it, but still fun for at least the conversation. They have a Lane Kiffin rule inside of this. And what that is you are not allowed to have a coaching change, a coaching move midseason. Obviously, you can still be fired, but you cannot take another job in the middle of the season, just like Lane Kiffin did last year, going from Ole Miss to LSU. The penalty for a coach leaving his team midseason is a season-long suspension the following year. So if this was into play right now, Lane Kiffin would not be able to coach the entire 2026 season. I like that one. I mean, the Lane Kiffin drama was terrible. What he did to both those programs, it was terrible. I don't think anybody won there. So I'm all for that rule 100%. They also made sure that the Army-Navy has a window, not a date, but a window where it's only a standalone Army-Navy game. Love that. You don't need a whole date. You just need, a certain window in the afternoon of that Saturday. And then the national championship game cannot be played any later than January 8th. So that's helpful, right? Just the week after New Year's as well. There also was something about HBCUs where they're trying to add federal grant programs, not too much into play with the Big 12. So my biggest question, going back to this, putting it all together, can Kansas State compete if this number goes, if this is approved? can Kansas State get $50 million to the program of athletics every single year? I like that they are thinking about Olympic sports and women's sports. I immediately think of women's basketball. But is that something that they could do? I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments, though. Let me know. Do you think it's something that is a good thing for Kansas State? Can they compete? And then while we're at it, what are 3 schools you'd like the Big 12 to add if you could pick any of them? Maybe we should leave the power ones out because they didn't need that 5-year independent window. On the other side, a couple Kansas State members were added to the Maxwell Award watch list. We'll talk about them. And out of those few that were named, which one has the best chances? Well, that'll be fun. We'll talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. That's right, baseball fans. If you think you know who's hitting a homer today, well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. All you have to do is just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet. For a chance at extra winnings, best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is a fun way to stay engaged with everyday's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has something capable of going deep. Everyone has the possibility of going deep this year. I mean, it's the MLB, right? It's baseball. Now you get a chance to make your prediction before first pitch. We just got the MLB trade deadline. Could we see maybe some of those new players on new teams trying to make a splash right away? Well, you could do that for free with Daily Dingers. So if you're ready to play your game today, join all the action on FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, its official partner of the MLB. Welcome back to the show, Locked On Kansas State. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, we're bringing you Kansas State coverage like nobody else right here on Locked On Kansas State. The Maxwell Award watch list was released. Top 81 players they believe that could be seen as the college football player of the year entering the season were named, and 2 Kansas State players were on that list. So if you want to play semantics, the world of college football sees 2 players in the top 81 in the country. I think there's an argument for both sides here. I'm not going to go too deep in it. And the reason why is because I'm not going to go too deep is because if you look at the full Maxwell Award list, it's only quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. So take that for what you will. But Avery Johnson and Joe Jackson were named to the Maxwell Award watch list. And I love it. I think it's very fitting. That both of them players were named. Here's the question, though. 1, do I think anybody was missed? And in this case, we'd be talking wide receivers. And I don't think so. I think maybe you could have made an argument about potentially Jace Brown if he was still here. Now, I don't think he was named. Let's put that in perspective for LSU. But I think his role is going to be much different at LSU than what it would have been at Kansas State. I think you could have made a case for him if he would have stayed in Manhattan. But if you look at the rest of this wide receiver room, it's a little unproven. So, no, I don't think that there should have been any wide receivers named to this. It seems like this was the right choice with Avery Johnson and Joe Jackson. Avery Johnson obviously has had some down years, but everybody knows his upside. Everybody knows what he's capable of. And what Joe Jackson showed last year, especially in the second half of the season, not many players play better than Joe Jackson the last couple games of the season in the country. So it makes sense that he's on this list. If I'm going to put one in the blue corner, one in the red corner, Avery Johnson versus Joe Jackson here, and ask the question, out of the 2 players, who has the better chance to win the Maxwell Award watch list? The Maxwell Award, I should say, not the watch list, to win the actual award at the end of the season, the college football player of the year. Who would you say? Would you say Avery Johnson because he's the quarterback award? It's really easy to take that route. Do you believe in Colin Klein to fix all the mistakes of the past, of what Matt Wells was at the offensive coordinator, what happened with Avery Johnson the last couple seasons? Do you believe that that is the route you would take? Or would you go on some proven experience? What we just talked about. The last few times we saw Joe Jackson play in a football game, he was damn good. He was really good. Might I remind you of a number 293? That's how many yards he had against Utah. That was a single game rushing record for Kansas State, beating Darren Sproles' record. So what corner would you take? I think I would lean Avery. I think I would lean towards Avery Johnson. I truly believe. Now, if you have been around with me for quite some time, if this is not your first off season with Locked On Kansas State, if you're an everyday or a true OG, you've probably heard me talk about the upside of Avery Johnson. Last year, I was very high on him taking the step forward that he needed to the point that I called him a dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy. That is the first time I've said it this year, and let it be clear that I was talking about how I was discussing it for last year. I'm not saying that that is something that I think Avery Johnson is this season. But although I don't think he is a dark horse candidate for the best player, best trophy in the league, in the land, I do think he has the potential, maybe even better potential, to be better this year than he was the last two. And a lot of that is Colin Klein. I think a lot of that is Gleason. I think a lot of that is Ellsworth. I think there's a lot of things going right for him. And I don't even think it's a coaching staff thing. I think it's experience of Avery Johnson. I think it's the lessons learned of Avery Johnson. I think it's the weapons surrounding Avery Johnson. Joe Jackson. I think this wide receiver core, although it's not top heavy, I think it's deeper. And the tight end room is certainly fantastic. So I think if any player out of the two could benefit from being seen as the Maxwell Award winner, I'd go with Avery Johnson. Now, if Joe Jackson has two 250-yard games and continues to just cook like he did towards the end of the season, well, no one might touch him. And that would probably be the best case scenario for Kansas State anyways, because then you just get it out of the hands of Avery Johnson. And although you're hoping he improves on his completion percentages and his turnovers, you wouldn't have to even make it a problem worth having, because you could just run the football down teams' throats. And that sounds like a good problem. So hopefully that is the case that we get here. But I'm not sure that happens every single game of the year. Joe Jackson had a very slow start to the season last year. The entire offense did, because they didn't know the direction they were taking. Joe Jackson still had a great season, and he really didn't wake up until the second half of the year. A full season from him is going to be exciting. It's going to be absolutely exciting. We haven't got that yet. We've seen full seasons of Avery Johnson. Now, we've seen him in a bubble the first half of the season when they were trying to figure out if they should unleash him after the injuries to Dylan Edwards. But we have never truly seen a full season of Joe Jackson. Looks like we'll get that this year. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. If any of these two players you think has a better chance of winning this award. And again, it's a tough award to win. I'm not saying either do, but this is just a fun thing. We're a couple days from fall camp. Let's speculate a little more. Let's have some fun on this show. Who do you think has the better chance? Let me know in the comments below. If you're listening on audio, you can always hit me up on Twitter, X at Christian S. Rauh. All right, Wednesday starts fall camp. Plenty to discuss coming up. I got some thoughts. Let's just kind of put them all together to end this show as we move on right here. Locked On Kansas State. Final few minutes here of Locked On Kansas State. Again, thank you so much for making it your first listen or second listen of the day. If you haven't already, go check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. You can check out Locked On Big 12 with Drake Toll as well. Lots of stuff going on across the network. Got some new things coming out very soon as well. Be on the lookout within the next week for some new things coming across the Locked On Podcast Network. Exciting stuff. Very excited to be able to announce that very soon. Let's discuss fall camp just in itself. We're going to dive deeper into this over the next couple days. and obviously when it begins. Now, fall camp begins on the 5th, but we won't hear from Colin Klein until the 11th. We won't hear from him until next Tuesday. So they kind of get a little bit of a half week to kind of get acclimated before Colin Klein's going to speak to the media. Kind of like that, right? Because you're not going to ask him all the questions that you just got to talk to him at media days for. Nothing has changed. If we got him on Wednesday, what would have changed? The exact same things we would have asked him at Big 12 media days. On the 11th, we'll have a couple days to discuss, what's going on with the running back 2 battle, what's going on with the wide receiver room, the pecking order of the offensive line, things like that. We're going to try and speculate that on tomorrow's episode. John Grove's going to join me for that one. But that is something that I am certainly curious about. I think the wide receiver room is deep. And again, I don't know if it is as top heavy as we've seen it in years past, especially with a player like Jace Brown who left in the portal. But overall, I think that there are more players that could make an immediate impact. Jerron Tibbs, obviously, is going to be probably a lock for wide receiver 1 if he's healthy. But what happens to the rest? I think that'll be really fun to see work itself out over the next couple of weeks. Offensive line as well. We don't have solid concrete answers across the entire offensive line. We assume John Pastore is one of the tackles. Who's the other one? Is George Fitzpatrick healthy and ready to go? Not hearing a lot of news about that. No news could be good news. We'll hear that for sure on the 11th. Who takes over for Sam Heck? Is it as simple as just putting Morris there? There's a lot of questions. Tanner Morley, can he take over as a guard spot? Is he healthy enough to go through that? There's just a lot of questions, and I think the pecking order on the offensive line and the wide receiver room will certainly be interesting. And then, of course, Jay Harris, Rodney Fields, the health of those 2 players. What will the running back rotation look like? Will it be a Joe Jackson and then a 2A, 2B of Fields and Harris? Or will it be a 1-2-3? Will it be a 1A, 1B, 1C? What type of workload, what type of shares will each running back get? We'll start to get an idea over the next couple of weeks. On the defensive side, obviously the biggest concern I've had the entire offseason has been the defensive front. You're just replacing so much because of eligibility. You lose some to the portal, especially on the edge, but interior defensive line as well. How does that front step up? Who steps up? Who's the player that everyone just can't stop talking about? That's just in the backfield over and over and over again. Who's that player? That's what I can't wait to hear over the next week. Who steps up in the linebacking room? Austin Romaine, no longer there. Des Purnell, no longer there. Rex Van Wyf was at media days. We think he's going to wear the dot. But what about some of the other players? The transfers coming in. Mekhi Mason. What about Gabe Powers, who was a transfer a few years ago coming over from Ohio State? A lot of upside behind him. I've had a few people reach out to me and talk about don't sleep on Gabe Powers. Don't sleep on him. And I hope he's right. I hope they're right. Because I think he is an excellent player. And I would love to see him take that next step forward in this linebacking room. And then the secondary is fascinating. Before we go, let's talk about that. The secondary is fascinating. I think this might be one of the deepest secondary rooms they've had in a very long time. Zayshawn Rich is back. Donovan McIntosh is back. You bring in some very interesting portal additions that I think are better than last year's. I think you're bringing in some really fun pieces that outdo the Gunnar Maldonados. How does that pecking order look? So a lot of questions that we are going to speculate, discuss, break down. There's your little primer of what the fall camp kind of conversations will be here on Locked On Kansas State, and we will try and make sure we make sense of it to the best of our ability. And let's not even forget special teams. Special teams has a lot of work to do. What can Stanton Weber do? Bring it back to special teams U. We need that. Going to have a new kick returner. Bryce Norberg no longer on the squad. So who is going to take over for that? Is it just as easy as plugging and playing Lockett? or does somebody else step up? All these questions are going to be answered, whether they're permanent or temporary, in the next 30 days. That's how close we are to football, folks. That is how close we are to football. We'll have another episode out for you very soon. We're going to meet up with John Grove, gopowercat.com. Speak some fun stuff. We got some fun things for you coming up in the next few episodes. And of course, we'll have some fun things as we always do. All right. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.